As we move into this tutorial, we're going to think about 3 strategic decisions that you need to make before you start doing your research. And we're going to think about these almost in reverse order. That is, that typically our works cited information is something we put at the end of a research project, but how we're going to do that we actually need to think about before we start doing our research. And then we're going to think about how to record the data or the information that we have collected. And again, you think, well, I don't need to make that decision until I found it. And yet, you do need to make that decision and before you start looking for it. And then, in terms of sequence, the first thing you're going to do is to go find information and access that. But again, we're going to think about how to do that last, and then we're going to do it first, so that the other 2 decisions are crucial. So we need to think about how we're going to cite this information. And your book talks about documentation and an oral footnote. An oral footnote is what you actually say in the speech when it comes time to give that piece of information. You're going to tell us where you found that and who said it or what they said. But in terms of academic writing and turning in things academically, you also need to provide a clear, accurate academic bibliography or citation or annotation. There are lots of different ways to describe this as a works cited page. I will tell you, just as an aside, that even when you're not doing things for academic research, I strongly encourage you to be in the habit of creating a works cited page for the reports that you make and for the speeches that you give. People will ask after a presentation where you found certain bits of information, and if you scratch your head and sort of move your feet around and say, well, I can't remember, then your credibility goes down. Whereas if you can turn to your outline and you can hand it to them and say, well, that's where I found the information, let them jot it down, or if you don't need that copy anymore, let them take it with them. Your credibility goes up, and also your effectiveness as a communicator goes up, because you've now given them a place to go next to find the information that they need. So now we're going to talk about just what the information is that you need to collect for your works cited page. And again, this is, we call this bibliography or bibliographic information. We might call this citations. We might call this annotations. I think the Think Communication textbook calls it documentation, but that's what we're talking about. And this is neither the time nor the place to go into a detailed explanation of how to do that, because there are resources available to you in a lot of different places that will explain it. But what you need to keep in mind is that there are standards for the format of a works cited page or of a bibliography. These are created by academic organizations. They're adhered to by colleges and classes. And if you're in a particular major, you're likely to rely on one particular style of documentation. And so you want to be accustomed to what's out there. The Brookhaven College website, if you go to the www.brookhavencollege.edu and then go to the library section, you'll see that it has templates both for the MLA, or what's called Modern Language Association style of bibliography, and the APA, or American Psychological Association style of works cited. And there's also a thing called Turabian, which was developed in Chicago, and it's also a very familiar style. There are really hundreds of different styles that different organizations, different academic disciplines will use. The main thing that you need to keep in mind is that your instructors in college, your professors in college, are expecting you to follow a format. They will often tell you which format they want you to follow, and then you need to be prepared to actually do that in your academic writing. And as far as I'm concerned, I want you to use either MLA or APA or Turabian, whichever one seems to make the most sense to you. I would encourage you perhaps to use MLA, because MLA tends to expect you to put both the first and last name of your sources. And when you're giving your oral footnote, it's often easier to explain it in first and last name, as opposed to just relying on first and middle initials and their last name, which is what you'll get if you do APA. So my bias would be to MLA, but again, you can use whichever one you want. And just make sure you go on the web, look at the examples, and follow the pattern, or actually go buy the style manual, which will tell you how to do that. In general, the general information that's collected from a source is the author, who said it, who are you quoting, and sometimes that author is an organization. But one clear clue that a web source might not be your best source is that you can't identify who actually said it. You don't have a sense. What's the title? The title of the work. If it's a magazine article, this would be the title of the magazine article. If this is a chapter in a book or a part of a book that has multiple authors, then you might include that title, chapter title, or if it's a web page, you're going to put the title that's at the top of the web page. Journal articles, again, is just the title of the actual article itself. And then you're going to want to make sure that you have the publication. And in the case of books, if it's one book written by a single author and the chapters aren't written by individual authors, as it's not an edited book, then the title and the publication are the same thing. But for magazine articles, newspaper articles, things that are taken from websites, those are all parts of a larger publication. And so there's some indication of what the publication is. And then if it's a book, you want to know the publisher. If it's a journal, you'll know the volume number. But you gather that information about the publication itself, the date that the information was actually published, the publication date, and then with anything that's taken from the internet, you'll be expected to provide the accession date, or when did you access that information. And then, of course, you'll need to know the page number if their page number is given. So that's generally what you're looking for. And depending on what kind of source you're looking at, you're going to be needing to collect much more data than just that. That's why you need to look at the examples and remember what it is exactly that you're wanting to find. My strongest encouragement to you, though, is make sure that you're keeping up with the bibliographic information as you're collecting resources. I say this from personal experience. It's a pain to have to go back and retrace your steps to find the source you were looking at just so that you can cite it appropriately.